Hello. So, today we are going to talk about money, about budget, and about cost management in the project, because it is what, after all, matters a lot. Our plan is big. We are going to start with some basics. We are going to add some remarks on public tenders, about budget overrun, and what is the connection between the life cycle and the costs. We will also talk about some techniques of cost estimation and how to divide the cost between different parts of the project. Also, what kinds of costs are included in our budget and how to divide them in a way. And we will try to reflect on costs and cost management in general. So, let's start. The first thing is the difference between cost estimation and the budget. So, we prepare the cost estimation first. It is a draft of our costs, and then we negotiate. We use different techniques to prepare it. In the end, it is approved by the organization that are going to pay for it, and this is the moment when it becomes a budget. So usually we can hear about the budget of a project, and that is correct because we can hear about the projects that are actually being executed, and in order to be executed you need to have a budget. Your costs need to be approved. Some basic things about project costs preparation. So, as usual, we begin with our modular approach, which is our WBS technique. We need to prepare the descriptions of the tasks, and based on the tasks coming from WBS, we can later prepare the cost estimation. So we deal with tasks. Then we can sum up everything. In the end, we get the total cost of the project. Sometimes we need to negotiate. Sometimes we have some limitations that we also take into consideration. All the time during the preparation phase and also during the execution stage, the best approach is to have different accounts for each separate task. This way we can manage the costs and we know exactly what kind of tasks costed us the exact amount of money. There are basically two ways of estimating the costs, and both of them are important. We need to learn them now. The first way is this descendant estimation, which means it is from up to the bottom. So some managers or experts, basing on some preliminary data, previous projects and so on, try to estimate usually the total cost of a project. The other way is ascendant estimation, which means bottom up, and this way you take the estimations of the cost of each task and you sum up everything together. In the end you arrive with the total cost. So this figure shows the descendant estimation. As you can see, all the information comes from up and goes to the bottom, so this is just dividing. And ascendant, in this case, you tell the functional managers and then the team managers what they need to do, and they answer with their own estimations of the costs. So, first of all, both of those ways are necessary. And we do not say that one is better than the other, because both are necessary, but in some different circumstances. Usually, we use the first technique, so Descendant, from up to the bottom, when we need to actually decide on the project whether to execute it, whether to plan it further or not, when we need to choose between different projects and we need this estimation in terms of money to be able to say which one is better or which one we can afford and so on. And the Ascendant way is necessary for the detailed planning. So let's say that I have decided on a project and now I need to know exactly when and how much I'm going to pay. If I want to get a bank loan, I need to show this schedule of payment to the bank, and this is what I do. Also, we can verify each of those estimations by just comparing them. So, who is to prepare the cost estimation? Well, a project manager may be the right person, the future project manager, or he or she should be supported by people like accountants because they have the numbers coming from the previous projects. And sometimes we even use a professional cost planner, especially when the project is going to be big and complicated and we need somebody independent to do it. The basic information in the Ascendant way of preparing the cost estimation comes from the bottom, so from the task leaders, but also from engineers, experts, from people who have the knowledge on the project. There's another question: who should not prepare the cost estimation? So the accountants alone shouldn't do it. Because, well, they only rely on historical data. If they don't have this technical knowledge about the project, they cannot do it. Also, the owner himself or the CEO or the investor are not the best people to do so, as they are emotionally involved with the project. So probably they would be too optimistic. Now it's time to make some remarks on tenders, public tenders. So when there's a situation, then you can win a contract, you can become a contractor, you can become a project executioner. And so there are situations when the investor wants to have the project executed, and the most important criterion is the price. And in this situation, if you want to be the executioner, if you want to earn on the project in the end, you have three options. I mean, you can set the price quite high, and in this case you will probably lose. You can set it lower and make it realistic in your opinion, or you can set it low, which happens in most of the cases because, well, this is what the tenders are for. I mean, they are to show the cheapest option. Usually they are to show the cheapest option. So if you really want to win, you can be eager to set the price low, so keeping some price margin for you, but just a little, and your chances of winning the tender become high. But there are some dangerous connected with it. So if, because of some unforeseen circumstances, your costs go higher, you can lose money. You can go bankrupt if it is really bad. And on the other hand, even if you think you were realistic, some unforeseen circumstances somehow appeared and you still lose money. So preparing the good cost estimation and including some kind of risk management is crucial if you want really to take part in tenders, public tenders, and so on. And this is what we should remember. The another thing for today is the budget overrun and the reasons for it. Because the things are not that easy. So, we speak of cost overrun when the real costs of our project are higher than planned. We can also speak of cost escalation when they are higher by more than 20%, which is a lot. And it can come from different sources that we can divide can come from the fact that it wasn't that easy to prepare the cost estimation. This is true like in case of R&D project, but on the other hand, there are projects that are not that unique. I mean, you would assume that you can calculate everything. Nevertheless, in the end, they costed a lot. If you take a look at this picture, you can see that just some big mega transportation projects executed in the US, and the zero line shows the final costs equal to the budget, so which should appear almost always. Okay, and as you can see, in most of the cases, the final cost was quite high, a lot higher in plenty of cases, and in less than half of the cases, the final cost was lower. I mean, I didn't count the dots, but it looks like 2/3 above and 1/3 below zero. So it's not purely statistics. It's not purely statistical difference, which means that there must be some deep-rooted reason behind it. So there must be some reasons causing this, what we would call systematic error behind that. So first of all, we need to say that accurate estimations are rare, and escalation is more often than having it done cheaper than expected, as we have seen. The dots were based on some real data. So what is the reason? So what are the reasons? Well, there are several groups of the reasons. Uncertainty and lack of accurate data, modifications of the system, economic and social reasons, bad management, personal reasons, and the way the deal was prepared. We will talk about each of the reasons now. So, the lack of good data and the difficulty of estimating the real costs. Sometimes it is very hard to avoid those things. Like the project is so unique that it is hard to do so, but our examples are not so. Those mega projects did not belong to this category. For sure, some bad planning could be avoided if there was careful planning. First of all, correctly defined objectives and the right WBS structure and everything that comes after that. So, first of all, sometimes the bad planning is the reason, or the lack of data. The next cause is the modification of the system. It sounds maybe artificial, but the thing is that, well, we can imagine the situation when the investor can see the final results, or the project is approaching its final, and the investor says that, well, we want something more. Okay, so during the execution phase, the objectives somehow grow. So the investors, clients, they want more from the product. So this way the costs must grow, which is obvious. In case of let's say most of the projects, there should be some kind of modification clause in the agreement. So yes, the investor can get more, but he needs to pay for it. And there are some other consequences to the situation, like the project can be longer. Also, there can be economic and social reasons. I mean, well, people can go on strike, the prices may rise, the currency may change, and some of the products that you need may be more expensive. In case of Poland especially, the strikes are what people like to do. Also, there can be bad management. I mean, people may not be that productive as you would expect them to be. There can be bad communication, lack of control, bad planning in general, and this is what we should avoid. This bad planning can come not only from the lack of, let's say, technical skills, the lack of project management skills, but also there can be some personal reasons. If the people planning are to execute the task, and as I have told you, this is what we often do when we want to plan the cost, I mean to talk to the future task managers, they can, in some cases, estimate the costs in an ambitious way. So to show that they can do almost everything for nothing, or on the other hand, they can show that the costs are going to be that high, and then they are going to make those savings and show that they are the best in cutting the costs. So this is why, if you can see that this is what is going to happen, so this is one of the reasons that an independent cost planner is a good choice in many cases. This person is only to prepare the estimations of the costs, nothing else. This person needs to be an expert, of course, and you pay this person just for preparing the costs, not for making them high or low, just for doing the work. And the crucial thing is that this person needs to be independent from anybody else working for the project. Okay, so to avoid any kind of conflict of interests. So if you want your costs to be prepared in a professional way, just pay a professional and independent person. Also, we can speak of something called a cost plus kind of contract, which is, usually most of the contracts are just for a fixed price. So you need to do this and that, and this is what you are going to get. And the cost plus is when you, says that we are going to cover all your costs, you need to do this and that, and then we are going to add you some money to reward you. Please remember that if the price is fixed, the executioner will do everything to make the costs low. Cost plus, in this case, there is no incentive to do so. So maybe you could think about some better solutions, like agreeing on a fixed price but promising something more if they do it better, they do it faster, and so on. This cost plus agreement can be dangerous. So we need to think about it. Another thing that is interesting for us is the money reserve. So, because if we know that, well, sometimes the costs become higher than we've been expecting, so we need to have something extra. And there's this thing called budget reserve, and this is for your cost escalation. We can also call it a sum for a fund for unforeseen circumstances. So it is not connected with any particular task, but you need to have it at your disposal. So it works like a time buffer. So if you don't need it, you don't use it. But if you need it, you can use it. The more unique the project, the more different unforeseen things may happen, the more money you need to have at your disposal. But you don't need to keep it, until the very end of the project. But you need to calculate it, and to have it, you cannot spend it on anything else. This is what it is. So, some money for unforeseen circumstances. If nothing like that appears, then you move this money to another project. Also, on the task level, we can speak of known uncertainty. Also on the task level, different things may happen. So also on the task level, you should have some buffer. If you add the cost of all the tasks, you get the basic cost estimation, and then adding the reserve, you get the final estimation. But this is not all, as sometimes we need a reserve, a special reserve, to cover the overrun costs. So this is something extra. For the situations with actually low probability of happening anyway, you need to have this possibility to use this money. It should not be at the disposal of the project manager, but at the disposal of the investor, of the total organization, because this is what isn't used quite often, but the organization should have some extra possibilities to deal with costs. Some more remarks on ambitions. Well, in some cases, when a project is famous, people, especially the politicians, are not going to let it not be finished. Okay, so this may be one of the reasons why those big mega transport projects were usually they used to cost more than the budget would show. And often they also lasted longer than it was estimated. So probably in case of those great big projects, this is the main reason, besides all of the technical reasons that I have just told you about. Now let's move to some reflections on what factors besides the amount of money you can expect from your project and the amount of money the project can cost you, what kind of factors can decide on the actual profitability of this project. The first of them is the moment you need to pay, or the moment you need to have your reserve prepared. Because if we take a look at the project life cycle, at the very beginning of it, so like here, there's quite a big margin of your final cost. I mean, this is your basic cost, and you have your budget reserve here, as you can see, but there is some area of uncertainty where you are not sure if you will need to bear those costs or not. As you can see, after each phase of the product cycle, like initiation, definition, planning, this area is smaller. So if you move on from the very beginning of planning to the execution of your project, also you can decrease your budget reserve, and this is important, as from the point of view of the whole organization, you don't need to say keep this money somewhere. You can invest it in something else, which is always a source of potential gain for you. You can think about another project and so on. So the thing about the budget reserve is that yes, you set it at a certain level at the very beginning, but towards the end of the project you can think of decreasing it and moving the money somewhere else. The more advanced your project is, the more certain you are about how much extra money you'd have to need. So you can drop your reserve, and of course there can be some unforeseen events at the very end, so it means that usually you cannot decrease your reserve to zero before you have finished your project, of course. There's another important thing. If we think of life cycle of your product, not project but product. So in terms of some kind of projects, if your product is to, let's say, develop and prepare a computer system that you are going to use, let's say 10 years, then what is important is that not only the cost of acquiring the system matters, but also the costs of maintaining it, servicing, however, expanding and so on, may be important. So like in case of products, some products are cheap when you buy them, but are more expensive as long as you use them. Some others are relatively expensive at the very beginning, so buying cost is high, but then you don't need to invest too much in them. Also, in case of projects and planning the costs, this approach is much better. I mean, approach including not only this short run cost, like executing the product, so preparing something, starting something new, but also the total life cycle matters, and you need to keep it in mind. So this is to think about costs in general, not only in case of projects. So moving forward, we can think about the ways we can estimate the cost of our project. These are going to be some techniques showing how to make it. So the first way is to ask somebody that knows a lot about your area of activity, about your future project. So this expert uses his or her experience and knowledge to create the cost estimation. Of course, the quality of this estimation depends on the quality of the expert, and of course on the independence of this person. So this can be this descendant estimation, of course. And then there is analogous estimation, which is based basically on previous projects. So if you're executing project after project and they are more or less alike, then you have enough experience to prepare a good cost estimation. Afterwards, the thing is that, well, you need to use let's say your common sense, because sometimes those slight little differences can make a great difference in the end. And of course you need to have your big database of the previous projects to rely on them. Another much more advanced way of estimating the cost is called parametric estimation. So you also base your estimations on previous projects, but what you do is that, well, you use mathematics. I mean, you can come up with a function like that, for which you have your parameters, and you just use them to get your final cost. As you can see, let's say that we want to compare the cost of building the buildings, and in this case there's a fixed cost, and there's the total space and the number of rooms, and which determine the total cost of a building. And you can compare several buildings, and you will get the final cost, which you can rely on is more or less, and in many cases this is enough. It is, of course, the standard estimation, but it is a little bit more sophisticated than just analogous estimation, so it can be useful. Then we have cost engineering, which is the most advanced method of dealing with cost. This is actually the essential cost estimation, which means this is what you do when you want to have your costs estimated in a professional way. It is actually the basic ascendant, so bottom-up approach, and you start with each task, and you, on the level of the task, divide your cost into workforce, materials, equipment, everything that is necessary, and you sum up everything. You can use software if your costs can be standardized, and in the end you get all the costs, and you add also the administration costs and so on. So more or less, this is the full cost estimation. This is the full cost estimation. This is what we mean when we plan the cost seriously. Okay, what we mean when we want to know exactly how much we are going to spend. This is ascendant, bottom-up approach. The another thing to think about is how to cut your costs. I mean, sometimes it is necessary to cut them. Let's imagine that you are a project manager and you need to cut the costs by some percentage, and so you can do it at least using those three ways. I mean, equally, so you cut for each task, which basically is usually not the best choice because some tasks are crucial and just cannot be finished if you decrease the amount of money spent on them. Of course, you can quit your job as a project manager, but it doesn't solve the case either. In the end, you can try to identify what costs actually can be lowered, which of the tasks can be executed cheaper, and well, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. Identify the potential possibilities for cutting the costs and cut them there. So which means that you need to be aware of each task that is included in your product. Any kind of mechanical cutting, like 10% per each, may cause a disaster. Another thing to talk about at the moment is what kind of costs are actually included in the budgets of projects. Well, there are different kinds of them, as you can see, and we are going to talk about them now. So there are labor costs, I mean direct labor costs. So you can show the cost in some unit, like the number of hours, and then you can set the price for each of them, and then you can calculate everything. Often there are starting fees, which means that you pay some money just for somebody to arrive and start working. It is often it is actually supported by and justified by the fact that this person needs to quit other job and so on. So you sum up, and in the end, you need to be ready to the fact that some changes are introduced during the execution phase, which is also normal. Basically, you can calculate the labor costs just by counting how many hours, how many days, and so on you will need, and then setting prices for them, and then summing everything up. Other costs are like materials, transporting costs, equipment depreciation, energy, spare parts, communication, subcontractors, and so on. Also, in case of those costs, even though there might be a lot of work to do, usually there are no doubts about them. I mean, well, you have the units, you know how many units you need, you just sum up everything, you use your Excel, and then you get your budget. But there's another level. Okay? Often you need to pay the administration costs. I mean, let's say that you are building something and you need an office, okay, to manage everything. So you need an office for the managers, engineers, and so on. So those costs are not connected to particular tasks. Okay, so a cost for the office of the total endeavor is not connected with just the foundation or just the walls or just some finishing at the end. This is the cost for the total project, and you cannot divide it between different tasks. So there are costs like that, and these are other costs like laboratory maintenance costs in case of R&D project, security costs often in different kinds of project, and so on and so on. So what can you do about them? Well, there are techniques to deal with them. So let's say that you divide them in proportion to the variable cost, which means that in proportion to the cost of particular tasks, so like 10% per each task. And sometimes if you know that in the previous project it costed the particular sum of money, so now it is going to cost more or less the same, multiplied by the total cost of the project, or the relation of the total cost of the future project to the previous one. You need to take into consideration the factors that can change those costs. There are some troubles when you want to divide the costs. The troubles, you can meet them both at the level of each project, but also if you have a lot of projects in your company, those problems can be even multiplied. I mean, how to divide the cost between different projects or between different departments. So there's a need to have algorithms showing everybody how to divide the costs, and the fact is that, well, it is not enough to have any algorithms, but those algorithms should be realistic enough to show the real division of costs. Okay, so why it is so important? First of all, because only if you can calculate your costs in a proper way, you get the real calculation of your costs, of your total costs, and then of your profitability. If you cannot calculate the profitability of your company, then you cannot run the company at all. So dividing the cost is crucial because of that. Assigning the costs to the project and departments can also cause troubles because, well, usually in big organizations, nobody wants costs. I mean, each of the departments want to say that, well, we are the best because we make the most of the profits. We have the lowest cost and so on. So it is not an easy thing to do. I mean, to divide the costs between the departments. So there's a quite big bulk of knowledge on that. Let's leave it here. I'm just telling you that it is not an easy thing to do. Another little thing to think about is accuracy of our estimations. I mean, we can estimate cost like this way or this way, plus minus 1,000, but it is not that important if we say that it is going to be 99,000 or 100,000. The important thing is that, well, to be close to what is to be close to the real cost. So it's not about the numbers after the comma, but it is about being close to the real cost. So This is why we don't usually use numbers like 5 to 8. For our predictions, we usually prepare predictions in some round numbers, and this is okay. Because if the difference is, let's say, less than 1%, you never know what is this going to be, so you don't care too much. And then there's this crucial question of profits. So imagine that you are the company that executes the project, and on the other side just the investor who is going to pay for it. So you negotiate the total cost, so the price that is going to be paid to you. What you think about is your profit, but to earn profit, first of all, you need to prepare the estimation of your own costs. First of all, then you add your profit margin on that. So this is the way you do it. This is another argument to show that, well, calculating your cost is crucial. It is crucial. Except the level of your potential profit, there are those little important things that actually matter, that actually can make the difference. Like the moments that you are obliged to pay the money, or you get your money from the investor. Terms of paying, other terms of services. It is all important. Let's take a look at here. I mean, so you are the executioner. This is your money. I mean, this is the money that you get from the investor. These are your costs. So if you get your money from the investor early, then if you got it like here, then you wouldn't have to have a great budget on your own. Okay. On the other hand, if the investor is paying you after a while, after you have finished each part of the product, then this is the money you need to have at your disposal. Okay. Usually, if you are the executioner, you wouldn't like to start the particular tasks too early, because then you would have to have even more money at your disposal. So these are those little things that can make the difference, because nobody wants to invest too much too early. So using the late starting date, you can start the task as late as possible, so you can flatter the demand for money in your project. You can save the money, but this way your time buffers are lowered, so your deadlines are in danger. So the thing is to be able to establish the terms of payment that don't put your deadlines in danger. Also, if we take a look at here, so there's money, there's time, and this is the working capital that you need. So you, as the executioner, you always need some money to cover your costs, while the investor pays you afterwards. Okay, so until this point, you make losses. Okay, in here, this is your profit. In the end, this is your profit. So you need to wait a little bit. Please remember that this is normal. I mean, if you are an executioner, usually they do not pay you in advance. They do not pay you in advance. And the thing is that I wouldn't like to agree to pay in advance, because there must be some motivators, there must be some incentives for the executioner to make this company do their best. Okay, so it is appropriate to pay for particular phases, for milestones, and so on. It is appropriate to pay a little bit afterwards. I mean, if this is all agreed beforehand, because the investor can check if everything is correct. So this is it. So to sum up, because we are finishing at least in a moment, we can use all the different ways of estimating the cost of our project, depending on what we actually need. If we want to just compare different alternatives, different ways of solving our problem, then this descendant cost estimation showing more or less how much it is going to cost is enough. If we are planning exactly what we are going to do, if we are sure what we want to achieve, then we prepare more precise cost estimation, and this is done with this ascendant way. The project manager needs to control the costs, and the basic level is the level of tasks. Inside the tasks there are different kinds of costs and so on, so sometimes you need to go deep into it. As usual, the key is not only to know the accounting techniques and to know the technology, to know the market prices, but also it is important to actually know the people that you are working with. I mean, you need to be able to say what you can expect from your people. You need to be able to say if you need an independent cost planner or you can trust your task managers. It always matters. It always matters. So the human factor matters after you've done with the technique. Thank you very much.